Hey there guys, this is going to be the first of about a 2 to 3 part series on how to build up and really use your Liberator effectively. So getting into flying is a pretty daunting process in Planetside 2 and the Liberator even more so. There's kind of a common misconception with a lot of people that a Liberator is basically a flying coffin, which is not incorrect for people who don't know how to use it. But once you start to really learn how and when to use the Liberator, it becomes easily the most powerful weapon system in Planetside at the moment. So for this video, I'm going to be focusing primarily on how to build a Liberator to suit your playstyle and what you should be spending your certification points and maybe station cash on. Alright, well, starting out, let's take a look at your primary weapon. I would highly advise purchasing the tank buster with either station cash or certification points as one of the first things you get for your Liberator. Now, the tank buster is relatively cheap. It's only 100 certifications or 250 station cash. And that's going to pay for itself in no time once you start using it. If you're only running a Liberator on one character and you don't just have money laying around that you don't know what to do with, then I would probably just buy the tank buster with certification points. It's only 100, really no point spending 250 station cash when it's that cheap to buy. However, if you do have multiple characters, then probably not a bad idea to buy it with station cash, because it will then be unlocked on all of your characters, and you won't have to spend that 100 certification points every time you start to build a new Liberator on a different character. Now, your tank buster is going to be your primary weapon that you use against everything in the game. It's got great damage, and you're going to want to really practice, get good with using it, and you'll find that you can just tear through people with no problem. For the most part, you're going to want to stay relatively close to your enemy, because up close it'll start out with 500 damage within 50 meters. However, it drops off quickly to a minimum damage of 250 at 300 meters. It also has an extremely low bullet velocity and a lot of drop, which just compounds the issue of using it at range. So, not going to get into exactly what all of that means, but the general idea is that you want to be as close to your targets as you can while using your tank buster while still remaining safe, not getting killed, hopefully. Now, when you first get your tank buster, great weapon, no complaints about it. However, you really can make it a lot better than it starts out with. When I first get it, I like to put a couple of points into the magazine size, and theoretically I want to get it up to the first 3 ranks, which will bring you up to a total of 42 rounds per magazine. That's going to cost you a total of 700 certifications, which is a relatively expensive investment for a newer player. So while I personally put it very high on my list when I'm starting out a new Liberator because I'm used to using it, and I know that for what I want to do I need that many rounds, I don't know if I would advise putting it incredibly high on your priorities list. There are probably other things that you can get for equivalent cost that will help you out more as a newer player. Now, looking at what you want to put on it beyond the magazine size, honestly, I feel that thermal optics really the only choice for it. If you're going to put an optic on it, you could put zoom on it really cheap, but given what I told you earlier about the damage drop off and the bullet velocity, if you have to zoom in on a target to aim at it well, you probably don't want to be using the tank buster on it anyway. So putting thermal optics, 200 certifications, pretty expensive. I wouldn't advise putting it on anytime early build. However, later on it's going to help you out a lot, going to give you really good contrast between targets and allow you to pick out what you're trying to shoot at, even if you're getting hit by flak, even if it's at night, and it'll just increase how quickly you can get on target and take that target down. Moving on to your secondary weapons, you begin with the Shredder, which is really an interesting choice for a default weapon because, while not bad, it definitely requires a bit more of a refined flying style and a bit more skill to use than the other two. So for a newer player, I wouldn't advise it. You can use it, but in general you're probably going to get more utility out of the other two. Now, your other two options are either the Dalton, which is essentially the bolt-action sniper rifle of the air. You fire one shot, very high damage, but then you have a reload after it before you can fire again. Or the Zephyr, which is fully automatic, 6 shots. It does better splash damage to infantry, however, it's not as effective against armor or aircraft. For those reasons, I would advise the Dalton, which will cost you either 1,000 certifications or 700 station cash. This is fairly expensive either way, but it's definitely well worth the investment. So choosing the Dalton over the Zephyr, there's multiple reasons, but the primary one is that with the Dalton, you can one-shot ESFs, and it is also much easier to hit them due to the fact that the Dalton has a significantly higher bullet velocity and significantly lower bullet drop than the Zephyr. Regardless of which one you choose, your upgrades are probably going to look fairly similar. Reload speed is very effective for both of them, and especially for the Dalton, while it might not seem like a whole lot of increase for the amount that you spend, giving your gunner that extra couple of fractions of a second in which they can shoot might give them that opportunity to line up the perfect shot and take out whatever's following you. Now, optics-wise, for the Zephyr, thermal is probably just flat out your best choice. The Zephyr is really good when you get closer, lower to the ground. The bullet velocity makes it very hard to hit targets from far away, and the drop compounds the issue. With the Dalton, I personally prefer thermal as well, simply because I like that increased contrast. I like to be able to pick out my targets quicker. However, zoom is definitely a viable option for that, and a lot of it's going to come down to what your gunner wants, because your gunner's going to be the one using it. You want them to be comfortable and as efficient as possible in how they're using the weapon. Now, Liberator has one more slot for weapons, the tertiary or tail gun position. You've got 3 options here. Your default is the Drake, which nothing too special about it. You can upgrade it to the Walker, which is better against aircraft. It has a higher rate of fire, higher velocity, it'll be easier to hit targets. Or you can put a Bulldog on it, which is nearly identical to the Bulldog on Sunders, which means you'll have a little bit better job killing infantry on the ground with it. However, in general, your tail gun, you're not going to be using it 90% of the time, and if you rely on it to keep you alive, you're going to find that you don't live very long. So, for the most part, you're 100% fine with leaving your Drake on there, not putting anything into it, and just kind of forgetting that it's even there. Alright, so now that we've covered the weapons, let's move on to your utility slot. There are 4 options that you can choose for, and 3 of the options actually have a use. Getting ejection seat, just don't. It's completely worthless, 500 certs, and the only time you would get it is if you have OCD and want to unlock all the things. Decoy flares on a Liberator function identically to decoy flares on an ESF. They cost 100 certs for rank 1, and they will break any lock that is on you, and they will prevent you from being locked for 5 seconds. They have a cooldown of 40 seconds, which can be reduced to 25 seconds at max rank, and that is the only difference between flares at max rank and flares at rank 1. Now, for a cert-strapped young pilot, these aren't a bad option. You get essentially full utility out of rank 1 for only 100 certs, and they will save your life every once in a while if you get into a bad situation and realize that there's 20 strikers on the ground looking at you. However, personally, I'm not a big fan of them. I've always been of the opinion that flying with flares on a Liberator kind of promotes a bad habit in that you'll feel like you can stick around an area longer than you can. The thing about using your flares, that means people are looking at you. And if you're a Liberator, you are a priority target. And if there's a heavy assault looking at you, it means it's quite possible that there's also a Vanguard or a Prowler looking at you. and you can't flare away from those. So in general, when you're starting out, it's better to just leave an area when people start shooting at you, as opposed to flaring and sticking around and potentially getting dumbfired or killed by a tank. Your second option, and the most expensive one to get, is for afterburners. These will give the Liberator an ESF-esque afterburner, which will give you a quick burst of speed. They're very useful for changing direction quickly, getting out of a bad situation, or for pulling off more advanced maneuvers. However, with the starting rank being 250 certs, it is very expensive to get into. If you really do want to experiment with it, I would advise playing around with them in VR, and then getting only the first rank for a while you're flying in the actual game. That'll kind of give you time to figure out whether you like it, whether it fits your flying style, and whether you want to make the investment to put more into it. At rank 1, there's no difference between it and rank 5 other than it'll take longer to recharge, so you'll get a pretty good idea of what they're like without making the full investment. Now, the last option, and my personal favorite, is fire suppression. Up until a month or two ago, fire suppression was a very interesting choice and was often overlooked for things like afterburner or flares. However, it recently got a massive buff and is now incredibly useful, along with still being incredibly cheap. At rank 1, if you're on fire, it will put out the fire and give you 3% of your total health back over the course of 5 seconds, and you can activate it once a minute. Each rank you buy increases the amount of health gained by an additional 3%, up to a maximum of 12, and decreases the cooldown by 5 seconds to a maximum of 40. Minimum of 40. At rank 1 or 2, you don't really see a whole lot of usage out of it, due to the fact that it'll only repair 6% health and you can only use it every 55 seconds. However, when you get it up to the final rank, it repairs 12% health and you can use it once every 40 seconds, which is incredibly useful, and it's also incredibly cheap, and purchasing your way all the way to max rank will only cost you a total of 380 certs, and I would highly advise working your way towards that, since you do see a large increase with each rank you purchase. Another thing that's really good about fire suppression, now that it got buffed, is that instead of only being able to activate it while you're on fire, you can now activate it at any point, which will, at max rank again, essentially give you a 5-second 12% health boost in a fight, which will extend your survivability by quite a bit. My strategy is usually to trigger fire suppression in any fight as soon as I both drop below 12% and know that there's more enemies around and I'm likely to keep getting damaged. The reason for that is that if you trigger it early in a fight, you get that 12% health back, you get back up to full health, and there's a strong possibility that the fight will last long enough that you can trigger it again, which will give you a total of 24% extra health throughout the fight. Another nice thing about fire suppression is that, unlike nanite auto repair, it will repair you through damage, which means that even if you're taking damage and or on fire, it will keep repairing, and I've had times where I've been getting hit by flak or fire from a nose gun, and my fire suppression has actually out-repaired it and kept me at equivalent health, and this can occasionally keep you alive long enough to land and repair, or get off a last shot that is just in time to take out whoever's been trying to kill you, or finish off a target. Now, moving on, we've got several options for the defensive slot. Your first option, and probably the best overall choice to just have on your default setup, is going to be nanite auto repair. What this ability does is give you a heal over time, which kicks in after a set number of seconds have passed since you took damage. You can reduce the amount of time that it takes to start kicking in and increase how much it repairs per second by purchasing higher ranks. It's a relatively inexpensive cert tree to start out with, and it's a good overall utility for you to have on your Liberator. It'll help out in all of your situations, Essentially what it'll do is it will increase your uptime. Instead of having to land every time you take a lock-on hit or every time you get hit by a little bit of flak, you can stay up in the air, keep in the fight, and as long as you keep from getting damaged, that auto repair will kick in and get you back up to full health. Another time where it's very helpful is when you're actually in an air-to-air fight with another Liberator or an ESF. Because what it does is, especially in a Dalton fight, there might be long periods of time where neither party is getting damaged and they're just trying to land a shot. And what that means is that you can get hit by one Dalton, and if you manage to keep from getting hit for another 15, 20, 25 seconds, your auto repair will kick in and get you up to a level where you can actually take another Dalton shot without instantly blowing up. It's also very helpful fighting an ESF because what it means is that that ESF has to continually be nosing towards you and doing damage. If they don't, you're going to repair the damage they already did, they're going to lose all of that progress they made on killing you, and eventually they're just going to run out of ammo. Unless they nose towards you, keep doing damage, in which case they're trying to kill you and they're going to be closer. However, an ESF that's trying to kill you is a lot easier to kill in return than one that's just trying to avoid you. So it essentially forces your enemy to continually engage you and gives you more opportunities to take them out. Your next option in the defensive slot is going to be vehicle stealth. And what vehicle stealth does is it keeps you from automatically showing up on an enemy's radar by proximity at a lower range. Now what it used to do was any rank of it would keep you from showing up at all. However, they changed it now. It's a little bit less useful. It now simply reduces the range before you show up. But the helpful part about this is that if you're flying over an area or trying to sneak up on someone, they won't get a big Liberator icon on their minimap as early, and if you get it maxed out, they won't get it at all, which will allow you to sneak up on targets and make those hit and run, get out type missions much more effectively. Another nice thing about vehicle stealth is that each rank increases lock-on time by 1/4 second up to a maximum of 1 second increased lock-on time at max rank. Now, this lock-on time used to never work, however, I tested it out about a month ago, and it did seem to be actually increasing the lock-on time, which is a great thing for people that want to use it. That's very helpful and can function in a way almost like flares in that it'll keep you from getting hit by as many lock-ons. However, vehicle stealth is a very expensive thing to put certs into. The final rank, which is the most effective since it'll keep you from showing up on radar at all, is 1000 certs. And if you're going to do it, I would make that my final goal. And for that expense, it's the only reason I don't recommend going into it early on. I just don't feel that you get as much use out of it for your cert investment as you will with auto repair. Now, the final option is composite armor, which reduces the amount of damage you take from flak. It's not incredibly expensive, and the last run rank will decrease flak damage by 10%. However, I still don't really recommend it purely because of how situational it is. It won't help you against any type of damage except for flak, and personally, I find that I rarely die to flak, and if I do, I would have died to it regardless of taking 10% less damage. And for that reason alone, I would not recommend that. I would go with either auto repair if you don't have many certs, and for a good general option, or vehicle stealth if you want to try to play a little bit sneakier. Now, the final choices you have to make are going to be for the performance slots in your Liberator. You have 3 options here, and I could make an entire video just going over these 3 options, looking at the pros and cons of each one and what you want to do. But for right now, I'm going to try to keep it short and just give you the general overview and my recommendation. Your first option is going to be called Precision Bomber, which improves your air brakes, turning, and rolling. Option 2 is High G, which improves your V-thrust, your pitch, and your, quote, agility. The final option is Racer, which improves your base maximum speed and the maximum speed with afterburners if you have afterburners equipped. In general, I haven't found much use for Racer and wouldn't recommend it as a rule. However, if you're going to use it, you definitely want to be running it with Afterburner. Between Precision Bomber and High G, you really get something of a stylistic difference in how you fly, which one you're going to prefer. To overly simplify things, High G will make you better at dogfighting, since the V-thrust and pitch will allow you to keep your nose pointed at other aircraft easier, while Precision Bomber will allow you to keep your belly pointed towards targets easier, giving your gunner more shots and more time on target. In this clip, you can see the difference in time between flipping and rolling with High G and Precision Bomber. So again, I could get much more in depth here, but as a general rule, I would advise using High G. It's a little bit more forgiving for a new pilot since you're much more likely to be able to pull out of a turn or pull out of a dive when you realize, oh crap, I'm 20 meters from the ground and I'd really prefer to not be crashed all over the side of a mountain. All of these options cost 100, 200, and 400 certs for rank 1, 2, and 3, and I would advise putting certs into them whenever you can spare, since there will be a noticeable difference at each rank. For some reason, I'm not sure why, I've always found that the difference between rank 2 and 3 has always been particularly noticeable to me. That could just be me, could be something real, but I would definitely advise getting up to rank 3 as soon as possible. Alright, well, that's about it for what you want to look at certification-wise for your Liberator. All of these pros and cons essentially are going to hold true whether you have a gunner or whether you're flying solo. In the next video, I'm going to try to get a little bit more in-depth into specific strategies and tactics that you want to use that will complement these builds or complement your flying style, and start trying to address a lot of the questions I get about how you can effectively pilot a Liberator without having a gunner. So, thanks for watching. If you like this video, it'd be great if you like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.